What? My free. Yeah. No, I could have just.
Well, I'm glad I put a tie on it. What? You moved the eggs before you got here. Looks like Brian got the short straw.
And Irene is too long.
I have a hard time with it. I told my wife that I'd better tell her like across the line this bit how I started getting jabbing with him. Oh, I shouldn't dive into this right now. He's easy to get sucked. Nice work. Good around. Yes. I hope he knows he does. He does. He really does. Which is not that I don't take him seriously. Enjoy meeting at something. I know. He's really good at what he did. Answer demands it, but he's always comes around. Thank you. Yeah, he always comes. Hey, Kelly. Sorry.
Turn on. Nope. I'm not planning to talk.
We had a Olmsted.
Oh,
This one is going down.
Jack ever? Are you running for election? Oh, terrific. All right, welcome everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mine's no. Everybody knows my luck with microphones. Apparently, I have to have it right here. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. So great to have you all here. Great to have such a robust audience as well today. This is a really important convening of our full city council and full county board, as well as our mayor. And it's just a really important topic today as we talk about our shared approach and vision for preventing homelessness. So thank you all for being here. I'm City Council President Brooke Carlson, and I will be handing it over to my colleague, County Board Chair Sheila Cascaden, in a moment to guide much of the meeting. I will be supporting her throughout. But first, I'd like to just take a moment to go over a couple procedural notes, and then we will have a moment to do introductions. So we do have them on the wall. They are not incredibly large from this distance, so I will read them out loud, but they're very basic. We want to make sure that we have a great, robust discussion. So we want to be courteous and respectful of one another and our many different perspectives as those add value to the conversation. We want to keep our questions concise and comments to around 2 to 3 minutes max, so all of us have a chance to share. We just ask that you raise your hand to indicate that you would like to speak, would like the floor, and we'll be keeping track of you in order, just as we do at council meetings. But we will alternate between city and county representatives. So it might be a little bit clunky as you wait for your turn, but we'll be keeping track of that. And then just a note that I know some of you might want to speak multiple times on an item, and you would have a chance to do that as long as everybody else has had an opportunity to weigh in on the item if they so choose. So with that, I would like to run a quick round of introductions. I know we'd love to have a lot of time to really get to know one another, and hopefully this is the first of at least at least a couple meetings, but hopefully there's an opportunity to come together in many settings and on many issues. So, but for now, we will just say our name and title and hand it off.
Mark Tyne, County Commissioner.
Kelly Ray Kirkpatrick, Ward 4 City Council.
Michelle Rossman, Olmsted County Commissioner, District 5.
Sean Palmer, City Council Member, Ward 5.
Laurel Podolsky Smith, County Commissioner, District 1. Good afternoon, Patrick Keene, Rochester City Council, Ward 1.
Kim Norton, Mayor.
Greg Wright, County Commissioner.
Norman Wall, City Council, Ward 3.
Dave Senjum, County Commissioner, District 2.
Brian Mueller, County Commissioner, District 4.
Molly Dennis, Rochester City Council, Ward 6.
Sheila Cascaden, Olmsted County Board, District 6, and current County Board Chair.
And Councilmember Bransford from Ward 2 will be joining us at some point as he's able.
Great. Well, this is, I think I was quoted as saying this is a rare occasion, and it really is. I can only think of, been a county commissioner now for 11 years, this is my 11th year, and I can only think of one or maybe two other times that we came together without another group bringing us together. And yet, as we're coming together to talk about housing, we know that that is one of the crucial issues that our community is facing. And look at all the audience here who also shares with the knowledge that our community needs to work together to address our serious housing shortfall, and that we have a range of needs in housing. So this is the first of what's intended to be two meetings. Candidly, when we came up with the idea, Council President Carlson, the mayor, and I had talked about we need a joint session to talk about this so we could get to common understanding. We had really envisioned a kind of more informal gathering than what we have here. And honestly, it makes me nervous to have my back to all of you, not because I feel in danger, but because I really wish that we were able to engage you in a broad community-wide dialogue about housing, because that is really what we need as a community. And hopefully today's discussion will all come to some common understanding, and some of the staff work that's happening without the board's presence, the council presence, will continue and have an opportunity for more active community engagement. You know, just talking to a few people in the audience, we have pastors here. We have representatives from our very strong partners around homelessness. We have people here are just out of interest. We have candidates for office in the audience. We have people who own hotels that are interested in seeing, can they be part of the solution? So we have a broad array of interest in this topic. Today's focus is going to be on homelessness, but the second session that we're planning for probably late summer will look at housing supply, because we cannot ignore the fact that we simply do not have enough housing in our enough homes in our community, enough housing for homes for all in our community. And with our philosophy of trying to create a vibrant community for all, your home is a really very basic part of your life stability, something that you can afford, something that meets your family's needs. So, but today we are focused on the question of those of us are residents who do not have secure housing. They're either not secure in housing or they are homeless without housing. And so our focus today is really going to be on that part of our big housing continuum, the kind of the entry level, the people who are the least secure in having a stable home environment. So here's our outcomes on the far wall over here. There's two things that we want to accomplish at the end of today's meeting. One is we want to agree on a community vision to end homelessness. And secondly, we want to see if there's agreement between the city council and the county board on that, on how we might get there. And we want to propose that we support a task force on developing a strategy for achieving that vision. We're going to spend most of our time today hearing from the staff leads on the county side and the city side on housing and homelessness issues. That we do have built into the schedule time for questions. When that time comes, as Council President Carlson said, we're going to take turns, just like, you know, it feels like we're saying to our children, right? We're going to take turns now, children, but we are going to take turns because we want to hear all the city voices and the county voices, and we want everyone to be able to participate. With apologies to all of you in the audience, we aren't going to be able to take a lot of questions. We are going to take questions from the audience today, and we're not going to engage you in the kind of dialogue that we hope will result from the city council and the county board agreeing on a vision and on a strategy for implementing that vision. So with that in mind, I think we're ready, unless there's more. Commissioner, I keep wanting to call you Commissioner. Can we go by first names? Would that be all right for today? Can we agree that that's okay with everyone? It's all right with our administration? Okay, all right. So we're gonna, Brooke, is there more that to be said before we launch?
I don't think so. Just, did we lose microphones?
Yes.
Is mine working? No.
Speak up.
Speak really. Speak.
Okay, just thanks to our staff and looking forward to a great discussion, and that we will be doing this in 2 sections. So we'll have a chance to hear the first part of the presentation, ask questions, have some discussion prompts, and then the second part will be a similar format, presentation, questions, discussion prompts. So staff will make sure that we're guided through that and we'll help you out.
So in the first presentation, we were looking to see, can we agree on a purpose statement at the end of the presentation? And can we agree on the of setting a goal of functional zero, build towards zero? And so with that, we'll turn it over, David Dunn, and to Taryn Peters, or David up first. And David is the Director of Planning and Housing for Olmsted County. None of these will work.
Well, I'll just go ahead and get started, and I'm sure the audio. Can you hear me in the back? I figured that would be okay.
Use your outside voice.
Hold your mic.
David, can I say something for the room about this? So if you would all just continue to operate like these are working, it is actually recording. It's an amplifier in room problem and they're working on it. So please continue to just talk into the mics. We'll still get a good recording for this portion.
Thank
you very much. So good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dave Dunn. I have the honor and privilege of serving as the Olmsted County Housing and Planning Director. I have the opportunity to present today with Taryn Eaton from the city and Mary O'Neill from Olmsted County, and talk a lot about some of the work we've been doing, and I think more importantly, talk about the work and the path that we want to move forward. So really, you heard Mr. Cascade talk about this, but really our outcomes today are twofold. One is to agree on a community vision. There's a lot of conversation going on in the community on this issue. The first part, we feel like you're really having some really implementable long-term strategies. Let's make sure we're all rowing in the same direction. So that's the first part of what we'll be talking about today. The second part of today's conversation will be about a strategy and approach that we're attempting to utilize. So housing stability is a complicated system. Whether it includes the emotional, mental health issues, substance abuse issues, lack of income issues. There's many things that contribute to people experiencing homelessness. And I think one of the things that as we have the conversation today is to remember,
wow, okay, no longer use the outside voice, got to go to inside voice. One of the things to remember, I think, is that every person has a story. Every person has their own experience, and every reason for experiencing homelessness is really unique to that individual. And so when we talk about the causes and solutions of experiencing homelessness, we really are talking about it at that individual and personal level. So as we kind of have this conversation today, I think that's just kind of something to keep in mind as we move forward. Oops, wrong button. So I'm going to turn it over to Tara now to give an update on a couple of city-related initiatives.
Thanks, Dave. Right? Maybe? Maybe not? Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Taryn Edens. I'm the manager of housing and services within the City of Rochester under the community development umbrella. Because we have this wonderful opportunity to be in front of both bodies, we wanted to give you a little bit of context. We recognize some of our city officials are familiar with the city's role as it relates to housing, but the county board may not be. So just some quick context setting is what we wanted to do. This is more of a preview for the county board to be aware. When we're looking at housing as a spectrum, recently economic vitality funding source has been an opportunity for us, and we've been presenting to council a couple of updates on where we are with this strategy, and we will be bringing it to the county board to share what we've shared with council thus far. So really just letting you know this is to come. Just as well, once again, housing and it's a spectrum, just a quick opportunity to share. The city and the county operate in different spaces and how we serve and support the various housing needs in our community. So this is more serving as a reminder of we as partners overlap in some ways and we leverage each other in different ways, right? So for example, the city often comes into a place of review of multifamily projects that are seeking financial tools. And the city gets an opportunity to provide support financially, and often that can result in units that are designated for housing stability, right? So that's one way we come into play and can serve population either experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness. Just as well, wanted to highlight specifically what is the city's role when we're working with this population. It really varies. So I wanted to just take a moment to highlight that. In some ways, we act in a space of prevention, right? So RPU, for example, provides utility support to folks in financial crisis, and that's an area of overlap that could prevent someone, right, from facing eviction. So that's a great way that we interact in a way that we don't think about often. When someone is in a financial crisis, they need to pay their rent. They don't want to worry about utilities, right? So that's a way that we interact. Just as well, we come into play with grants sometimes. So under community development, we do have a federal grant, and we've used that in ways to support Catholic Charities, for example, in funding the warming center in some ways of contribution there. So that's another way we can get involved. Just as well, the public library is a great location where we find many folks who might be experiencing homelessness need as a place just to be, right? So often that is just used as a way of providing informational resources to folks experiencing homelessness. But specifically, they've provided a wellness corner in the past and a social worker for those folks. So just another way that we can also be an avenue to provide resources in a way we didn't think about, right? And then lastly, a lot of our departments, community development, parks and recreation, and police department, act in a space of enforcement and interacting with this population, right? So that's a huge opportunity. If we're on the ground working with these folks, we certainly want to partner on what's the best way to move forward and achieve housing stability for all. So we interact in a variety of ways, and I just wanted to take a moment to highlight the city's role, frankly, in serving and working with this population. So with that, I'll turn it back over Olmsted County to talk about some of their things.
Yeah, thank you, Taryn. It would be remiss if we didn't give a few updates as well on the county side. There's some projects that we've been working on that since we have an opportunity and we to speak to the city council and the mayor and many members of the public who maybe don't see some of the things that we're working on all the time, we just wanted to spend a couple of minutes in sharing. The first one on here is a project we're working on that actually is working with family homelessness. And so we're partnering with Family Promise. They are creating a new facility. This is at 1621 10th Street Southeast. It's a former group home that we are actually in the process right now of working with Family Promise on remodeling and renovating that facility. Hopefully by June, we will be able to work with them to expand the capacity of family shelter in our community. We know that, again, as we talk about gaps, we know that's been one of those gaps in the community. So we're very excited about that project. The next one I just wanted to highlight and touch on are the residents of Old Town Hall. This was a conversation that started back in September of 2023. Many of you may remember this was our original site for our emergency shelter as part of our application to the state. Unfortunately, that wasn't funded, but as part of kind of due diligence process and identifying what are the needs in the community, the county has decided to move forward with the purchase of the building. Right now, it is a mixture of student housing, some affordable housing and office space. As we're looking at this facility and we start the transition process, we'll really be working on trying to make sure, number one, that it remains affordable for people with disabilities, for seniors. We also have a few units that we're attempting to set aside for some of the youth in the community that are struggling to get their first apartment. And then finally, the last kind of target for this particular project is recuperative care, because we know one of the things we hear over and over is that it's very difficult to heal when you don't have a home. These are this is Mayowood 1, but we are in the process of building the Mayowood 2 apartments. I can tell you today that we will be renaming that project Trailside. So there's a big news story that just dropped. It will be the Trailside apartments as we move forward. Huge voter turnout. We let our team vote on it, and that's what won. that, there are some other really good options that we didn't allow, but anyways. So this is a project, it's 36 units of senior housing that we are just starting the process of working with Minnesota Housing on. We hope this gets in the ground this year. Minnesota Housing is backed up. There were an awful lot of projects funded last year. We just had our initial kickoff with them yesterday, but we are hopeful that adjacent to the building that's there today, you will see construction starting late this fall. And then just a little bit as we talk about, today we're going to focus really on the system level of homelessness, but really just a little bit too about the individual experience and talk a little about the outreach that's going on right now. We have the housing stability team that Mary and Jake Radke, who's in the audience here, oversee that team. And one of the things that they do that I don't know is very well publicized, frankly, is that we have the Empowering Connections and Housing Outreach, or ECHO Center, directly across from City Hall or the Government Center at 206 4th Street Southeast. The ECHO Center is open 7:30 to 2:30, Monday through Friday. It is intended as a place that you can either call or drop in, and you'll have social workers there who can help address some of the housing issues that individuals may be facing. You don't have to be experiencing homelessness to utilize the ECHO Center, so it's really something that we want to make aware in the community and really continue to utilize the strengths of this team, because we know that it's a challenge to provide housing for people. It's also a challenge to find housing. And so part of what this team does is understands that individual story and how that might help assist in their housing journey. So now that I've gotten my promotional plugs out of the way, I can kind of move on to a little bit more of what we wanted to talk more about today, which was really developing a community response system. So just a little bit to start with where we're at today. I know that's one of the challenges we see all the time, right? Where how many people are experiencing homelessness is probably the most common question that we get. And frankly, it is a very challenging one to answer. And so what we tried to do up here was to put some numbers to kind of give a little bit of perspective where we have those and some of the latest data points that we have. So you can see there that back in July of 2023, we did our last community count of people who were unsheltered, and that was 174 people. One of the other data points that we get every year is from the Rochester Public School District, which is another amazing partnership that we have. They have identified 570 students who they would say are in transition, which is school lingo for experiencing homelessness, in the 2023-2024 school year. Now, there's some differences in definitions, and so the numbers always kind of change a little bit, but as we kind of talk about what is the scale of this problem, and as we look at it, and also highlighting our partnership with the schools, this year is actually it started, and we've just now reached the year milestone of our HOPE program, which has 2 social workers embedded in Rochester Public Schools for the sole purpose of working with social workers, working with teachers and administrators to connect those students to housing needs. It's an amazing program. I see Lita here from the school district, and thank you for your partnership, because that helps families address the housing instability issues. If you don't have a place to go home, you can't do your homework, it's impossible to thrive. So we look at all of these issues. The warming center numbers, that's another data point that we look at. We have been fortunate this year. We have great partners. I'll talk a little bit more. I wish we could spend the whole hour and a half just heaping praise on the partners and all of you sitting in the audience today, because you're truly doing amazing work. Catholic Charities of Southern Minnesota has operated our warming center since 2019. They have done that very well. This year, knowing that there was some enhanced need in the community, they partnered with the Salvation Army, and the Salvation Army provided space for an overflow shelter. So that has made sure that over the winter months, we haven't had to turn anyone away. And so when we talk about this, when we talk about shelter, you can see there that we're averaging about 10 to 15 to 20 people a night in that overflow facility, plus the warming center. So again, We want to thank them for the work that they've done to make sure that people haven't had to be out in the cold over the winter months. So where are we at today? I think that's a good question as we start. So as we talked about a couple of slides ago, we had applied for a grant back in November from the state of Minnesota to build a housing stability center. Unfortunately, that grant was not funded. And so as we've kind of been trying to figure out where do we go from here? Really what's happened is that the providers in the community started coming together and started having some conversations about how do we move forward? Where do we take our next steps? How do we react to the needs of the community, but also understanding that that initial request was denied? And really, how do we work forward together? And before I jump to the next slide, I think I just want to kind of say one more thing about that. I think if there's a theme today, it's big picture and creating a vision. But if there's a second theme today, I think it's about trying to find common ground. There are a lot of differing opinions in this room on a lot of different issues, including some around people experiencing homelessness. But what we really want to do is set our North Star, create a community vision, and get everything that we can all march toward together. And then as we start to work toward those goals, we can go through those other conversations as needed. So really building off of that common ground and that community framework as we move forward. Like I said, we have had a lot of work from our partners, and they are really helping to lead these efforts. And so I just want to highlight their work here. It's been amazing to have an opportunity to work with such great people. And I could, like I said, I could spend the next hour going through and heaping praise on all of them and the work that they do. But I'm sure Mary would have to tell me that my time was up long before then, because in fact, this is a very formal setting. It's not the informal community conversation that we had maybe originally thought. So as part of this, though, you have to look back and say, okay, where did things go wrong? And I think as we really evaluated that as part of our application to the state, and really what happened where we weren't funded. And I think what we really lacked were a few things that are on this slide here. But the biggest one was there was no community vision. There was no overarching goal or objective that we were trying to reach. In some ways, there was a funding opportunity. We were trying to seek the funding. The reality is the project as we proposed it didn't have the community support that it needed. There was a lot of concern out there about what this would mean. And so we hadn't had the opportunity because of the timeframes and other things to really adequately vet that as a project. And finally, this was discussed in isolation. Housing is a continuum. Homelessness is a system. And really, in order to have these conversations, we need to really look at it that way and look at the individuals that are involved with the system and how do we make those, how do we enhance the lives of the people that we serve? So as I said, there's a lot of components of this issue. And some of the things that we're not going to talk about today, I at least want to acknowledge. I know they've been the issues that the City Council has been grappling with. And they're very, very challenging issues. It's challenging to figure out how do we address these issues. But again, I think if we really take a step back and really think about how do we go forward, instead of thinking about maybe the symptoms of the experiencing homelessness, if we really start to think about the causes, we can start to work together as a community to really start to work toward ending homelessness in Olmsted County. So what we did, we hit the pause button. And we're here today. So instead of kind of trying to go right back at whether it was another shelter application or here are the next steps, I think collectively what we said as a group of providers and as staff is that we need to come together and look at the bigger picture and come up with some bigger goals and objectives and create a community vision and an implementation strategy that we can all work on together and that we can all move forward on as one. That doesn't mean that there are not going to be bumps in the road. We will have to build the bridge to the future. Unfortunately, we do have to address some of the issues that are in front of us today. But as we look at this, our plan really is to look to our vision and build back to today and look toward implementing toward tomorrow. And I think as we think of this, we know that we'll be looking at these hot button issues, these difficult issues, these challenging issues where people in this room will not always agree. But the nice thing is, I think one of the things that makes us great is that we can disagree without being disagreeable, and that we can all want to move toward a common goal and a vision. So, creating a community vision. I think when I think of this, I think what's our North Star? So where are we trying to head? And as I think of this in the big picture, what is it that we're all trying to achieve here? And again, I think as we talk about this today, as you all as elected officials and leaders have this conversation, I'm hopeful that we can kind of come to some synergy around that. And where do we want to focus our resources and what is our desired end state? So we first started on this journey, we looked at kind of what the state had put forward. The Interagency Council on Homelessness really talked about it in this way, which was first prevention when at all possible. So prevent homelessness in all cases if you can. But if you're unable to prevent people from experiencing homelessness, let's make it rare, brief, and non-recurring. So we took that guidance from the state and we got all of our creative teams together, and we came up with this vision statement that we're proposing to all of you today, which is in Olmsted County, we strive to end homelessness by focusing on prevention and making homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. So that's really the first thing as we get into the questions here in just a moment in the discussion that we're seeking some input and consensus on. Is this the right vision for our future? Is this kind of that right North Star? So just to give you a little bit about what that means, because I think from a practical standpoint, I know as elected officials, you all have to make very difficult decisions every day, but really talking about prevention, whether that is first and foremost eviction prevention, the efforts that we have going on there, whether that's partnerships to do that, the emergency assistance that's needed. So how do we, again, even getting upstream from evictions to say someone's had it. There are 8,000 families in Olmsted County who are paying more than 30% of their income in rent. For those 8,000 families, when it happens, whether it is a medical, a car, a kid that's sick, it can get very close to a crisis quickly. And so having that emergency assistance available is part of building a robust system. And then that rapid rehousing. So when homelessness does happen, what we can do to help to make sure that we can get people rehoused without actually having to experience homelessness at all. So rare, again, it's having the adequate resources, whether that is new housing, whether that is repurposing existing housing, whether that's rental assistance. One of the things we haven't talked about today and won't talk about too much is the role of rental assistance. That's really the golden ticket for so many people in our community. It allows them to pay an affordable amount for rent and still have money left over at the end of the day. So it's really an all of the above type approach to this to try to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. And so there you can see having those resources available. So again, as we talk about it, having the system in place, being able to connect people to where they need to go when it does happen. And then hopefully moving them just a little bit away from the edge. One of the things that I think that we're very good at here, we're very good at connecting with people. We're very good at, we have our human services teams, both at the city, the county, and then our partners who are in the audience and beyond, do a great job of engaging with people. They do a great job of connecting with people and bringing them to resources. But really the part where we also struggle from time to time is there's so many people that need help that sometimes we think about housing as the end, and a lot of times it's really just the beginning. And so beginning to build those relationships, build that rapport, and hopefully allow people to back away from the edge. And to really build a system that looks much less like this cycle on the left and more like something you see on the right. So as we talk about ending homelessness, we know that from time to time, people may experience homelessness. But again, it's having that system in place that can quickly respond to that individual crisis. And so instead of this recurring cycle that goes on and on and on and continues to build trauma and continues to impact generations, it's getting someone from safe and secure housing through the valley and back into safe and secure housing as quickly as possible. And so again, as I wrap up here and we turn it over to you for questions, comments, and conversation, what we're really looking for today is, I think, some guidance from all of you, and are we moving in the right direction here? And we're going to first kind of start with that big picture vision. Is that kind of a vision that we feel like as a community that we should move forward with, that we should look at? And then is it really our goal to end homelessness in our community? And so I think that wraps up my portion of the presentation. I don't know if before I said if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them.
So we'll open to questions from the council and the board. And again, we'd like to alternate county board, city council, or vice city council, county board, and then make sure that everyone has had a chance to ask a question and get a response before you ask again. So what questions do you have? Mayor.
I don't know if it's working or not. Are we on? Yes. Okay. As I read this over before we came, and I appreciate the presentation. On the slide on preventing unsheltered homelessness, I felt like there are some things that are missing from that discussion that we might need to address or add to in order to kind of dig in a little bit. And a couple of the thoughts I had on that were, what about people who just arrived in the city that never had a home in Rochester? What about those that are dropped here in Rochester by law enforcement from other counties for treatment that aren't then picked up, and that they end up here again, not having a place to get back to? And then what about court responses for folks who are, in at least one instance, deemed not well enough to stand trial for a crime that might have been committed, or even a gross misdemeanor or whatever. They're not competent, and yet the door is opened and they're back out on the street, and they're not, and we assume they're competent to care for themselves. And so those were three things that are things that I've seen that were, what about this type of situation that isn't quite as cut and dried as some of those other things you had up there. So I had those questions, and I don't know if you may or may not have answers.
I don't have a great answer, but so I'll start with my canned. Thank you for asking that question, because it buys myself time to try to come up with a good response, right? I think as we look at this, it's really about building a system. And so as we talk more in the second half of this presentation, it's about building the system that can react to the needs of individuals and in real-time information. And so that would mean then, as people come into our community, being able to make that connection with them and understanding what those needs are and best helping to fill those needs.
I'll jump in. Thank you, Dave, for that presentation. My question is about trauma, and wanting you to speak to the trauma-informed nature of the programs that you've created, that we're creating together. Because most people experiencing homelessness have experienced a long series of traumas even before they lose housing. And someone who has a high ACEs score, the Adverse Childhood Events score, has a much higher likelihood of becoming homeless at some point in their life. So could you, and homelessness unto itself is a trauma. So could you please elaborate on the trauma-informed nature of these programs and potential programs?
I'll do a quick stab at it, but then I'm Mary, you heard trauma, you knew I was coming to you. Mary O'Neill, our Associate Housing Director, oversees that area in a little bit more detail. But what I can kind of say is you need to meet people with where they're at and understand, what you can about the amount of trauma that's been there, right? There is most people who we are working with have had significant trauma experiences in their life. And so for us, it's one thing to say, hey, how are you today? Do you want help? But the reality is, until we can build that trust and that relationship, it's just not there. And so I think one of the things that we've heard from our teams and the folks out in the field who are doing this work is that because of that trauma, because of that scar tissue essentially that's developed over time, it takes more time, effort, and energy to really connect with people. And so part of what we want to do as our strategy, again, is focusing on those connections, building those relationships, and then allowing us to utilize those relationships to connect people to services, because we know that if you don't have trust because of the trauma that has built up over time, you might be initially you may be resistant to things, but really as you think of the long run and trying to connect and build that trust and that ability to provide services to someone, or that ability just to even be able to be there to lend a hand or to lend an ear, really does start to grow. And I don't know, Mary, if there's anything you'd add to that.
Yeah, I would add, I would say that all of our partners in this homeless response system are highly trained around trauma-informed care and approaches. I have no doubt about that, but I think the way our system is set up currently doesn't show that. It isn't conducive to, it's not lending itself to a trauma-informed homeless system response. So as we prepare to introduce the Built for Zero concept, I really feel like this is what's necessary to really get at the trauma that one is experiencing while going through homelessness, but what they've also experienced prior to homelessness. I know we do a great job around it, but I don't think our system is trauma informed as a whole, the way we're going right now.
Thank you. City's turn.
That's what I was waiting for. Thank you. Sorry, that's how we work, right? Mr. Dunn, can you please return to slide number 14? I believe I have a question on that particular slide.
Maybe.
And basically, I'd like you to comment on your statement that you haven't turned anybody away from the Salvation Army extra overflow warming center. And I know I've received several texts and emails about that. It's my ward. And we've put these things in place, but some of them seem to continue to fail. Of course, we can't control others, but how do we make sure that those systems we have in place actually function? Such as the warming center. It's not staffed. It's been closed since Sunday. The overflow center has, and people are being turned away. They're going to other places to try and get shelter. Some of our other providers to get shelter. And then also really want to acknowledge what you said, Mary, because I think that's the key. We have a system of trying to do good, but the components of it aren't working. And I would like to bring our judicial system into that. We've got RPD working really, really hard, trying to do the best work they can to help those that are most vulnerable. Yet we have a judicial system that is not working along with RPD to help move forward and or hold folks accountable or offer them the support that they need. So do you have any way to talk about how we can get past those gaps that continuing to occur? Even for instance, what's the new name? Trailside? Yeah, the new name for Maywood Trailside, the issues that have been going on there for the
So,
last month. The-
I'm going to interrupt you, and I don't mean to be rude, but I am known to be rude and interrupt.
That's okay. I
You're asking
appreciate
about
it.
three
I am
questions
too.
in a row. So how about asking one? You've got one or two. Let's
Yep.
start with those two, and then we'll come back for your third
Okay.
question.
And the third question may be most relevant in the second part of the conversation about
Yep.
strategy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know that I mean, I think specifically we're working to build a system. I think that's what we want to talk about. Yeah, Council President, I think that's a big part of where we want to go from here. And we kind of wanted to take a little break, go through the first part of the conversation, and then talk about the how and a little bit later and start to build that roadmap. And so I think for us, acknowledging, all of the good work that our partners are doing, but also acknowledging that there's more we can do. And also finally acknowledging that we may need more resources. And so all of those things just kind of coming together and saying, yeah, we're doing what we can. There's opportunities that we can do better. And as we start to build a strategy and kind of get some consensus around as a community where we want to go, how do we get there?
Was there a specific question around the overflow shelter you wanted answered, or just making a comment?
It's just staffing. How do we get a backup system for when our staffing system does not meet the need? Right. And I don't know if that's further up the chain at DHS increasing wages. I don't know if it's loading more staff into the system that we can call on. I don't know if that's added responsibility to management or, the folks that are overseeing those sites, but we can't say that we offer services when we don't offer services. That's that negative impact on our most vulnerable folks that they're counting on, and then we're not there for them.
Every night I know that our partners do everything they can. I know that it's a struggle, it's a challenge. They work with staff that have lives as well, it happens to our staff, whether that is, for a lot of different reasons. And so, yes, as we count on the staff that we need to support these services, that is a challenge across the board, is having adequate staffing to continuously be able to operate these services. And so, yeah, it is a challenge. We're aware of it and we're continuing to work on it as we try to fill many holes in our system.
Greg.
Mr. Dunn, thank you very much for your presentation. I would include in your presentation another area in which we are trying to prevent homelessness.
You need to use your microphone.
Oh, I thought it was. Thank you.
It's close.
There we go.
All right. How's that? Better?
That's better. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I would include in your presentation another area in which we are preventing homelessness, and that is trying to keep elderly people in their homes. One of the things that we're going to be faced with in the future is a growing number of elderly people and a growing number of elderly people that are going to be very short on income. And it is going to be a challenge to keep them in their homes. We have to keep them in their homes because we have no place else to put them, which of course, again, goes back to working with our community partners, because in order to keep people in their homes, they need transportation. They need household chore services. They need a way to help keep up their home. And I know that HRA has a part of this. So I just want to make sure that we include that in there, because that's a very large portion of the population that we have no place else for them. So by keeping them in their homes, we are preventing homelessness.
We'll take that as a recommendation. And
yes,
I don't think there was a question there, but I think you got the message, Mr. Dunn. And Commissioner Keaton, not Commissioner, Council Member.
Thank you. Dave, one thing I struggle with here is, again, right in front
Would
of
you
us.
please use your microphone? Thank you.
Right in front of us is this discussion on this vision statement. And I think we're going to be asked to somehow weigh in on this. And I've always struggled personally with the vision statement being very high level. And then, like, what are the values underneath that? And what are the strategic priorities? And then what is the thing? But this is a high level thing. And when I think back to your community conversation on symptoms and problems and causes, I think many of them are outside the realm of what local government can control. can you just respond or help me get to the point of a goal of ending homelessness with things that are outside of our reach is still a good thing to project to the community and say that's what our goal is, even though so many of the root causes are outside of our authority?
So I think we're all incredibly blessed to live in Rochester and Olmsted County. We have one of the best hospitals, if not the best hospital in the world here. We have a million things going for us, but I think the biggest thing that we have going for us is the collaboration and the partnerships amongst one another. So I think as we kind of look at this, as we look at this issue and we look at how do we want to address homelessness, when we talk about reaching that goal of a functional zero, which is what we're talking about in ending homelessness, we have the tools in the tool belt. I truly, honestly believe with investments, with being strategic, this has been done in other places. So I think instead of thinking about this as a problem that we can't solve, let's start thinking about it as something that we can solve. And how do we look at a system, allocate some resources, reallocate existing resources, and then allow ourselves to really think about the big picture. And then kind of as we get into it, we'll drill into a lot more detail on kind of the specifics. But the other part I want to highlight is absolutely, it's not just a public sector issue. We're here today because we're part of city, county staff, your elected officials, your community leaders. I think a lot of this work will be done by your role as a community leader and helping to guide the rest of the community, whether that is the private sector, the nonprofits, and really helping to galvanize the community around this as an issue and helping to bring some additional resources, support as we need to.
Thank you.
Molly. Oh, Tony next, excuse me. Dave, did you had your microphone out?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe just to tag on to Councilmember Keene's comment, because I've been thinking about this as well. And as we think about prevention being rare, being brief, being non-reoccurring, and I'm not sure if I'm getting ahead of the group or not, and I don't mean to do that, but and then I read the proposed purpose statement, and I'm just, people on the county board know I wordsmith, and I just think words are important in terms of providing direction, motivation, and so on. I would advocate on a personal basis that we dedicate ourselves to ending homelessness, not that we strive. To me, striving is trying hard, but if we don't make it, ho hum. Dedicating ourselves is that we are truly dedicated, and when we hit the wall, we're going to bounce back and hit it again and again and again, and make this work. So my urging would just be make that purpose statement just a little bit stronger in terms of being dedicated to this cause and not striving to solve it.
You know, you're helping us because the next question we're going to ask is about supporting the vision. So you've moved into that territory. Perfect. We'll have one more question, general question, and then move into the next question we're going to ask you is what would it take for you to support the vision? And Dave just gave us an example. It would take a stronger statement than what we currently have. So Molly, what's your question?
All right, I can talk pretty loud. I turned my chair because I too did not want to have my back toward anyone, so kind of side toward everyone. But I wanted to, you know, I'm a huge supporter of the police department. I also adamantly oppose the camping ban. I know there's not any real way. There's no win-win is really hard to come by because there's so many different barriers. It's serious, complex, and an incredibly delicate, many moving parts issue. Talking to people with experiencing homelessness, for every 50 people, there are 50 reasons. So to do the prevention is very difficult, I think, with so many barriers. And so I just had a couple quick barriers that I have heard firsthand from people who are experiencing homelessness. So I just wanted to throw those out and see if there's any feedback or any thoughts on how just a few of these barriers that I know are here. One amazing person, she had to sleep outside because she loved her dog so much. It was a therapy dog, and no place would allow her dog, the warming center, domestic abuse shelter. So that's an issue for people who have their pets as important as family to them. That was a barrier. Another barrier from someone who experienced domestic abuse. She had to come here because in her community, just right outside of Rochester, does not have resources for homeless and homeless beds. So she and many other people, I imagine, have come in from neighboring communities to utilize the services here in Rochester, which I think should be addressed, maybe somehow outreaching to other communities as well. And oh gosh, there's so many of these thoughts, but another big one, of course, is there's people who are money poor. We have property taxes increasing. We have poverty level wages as a para for the school district making under 20,000 a year full time. We also have poverty in families. A lot of people don't have a family to have a house to a couch to crash on. So these also cause huge issues. And then one that I heard over and over again when I've been standing in line with people experiencing homelessness, when I've been volunteering at the Warming Center, is that they have come to Rochester from all over because they truly desperately want treatment for incredible life jeopardizing health issues. And they come here to the Mayo Clinic, their funds are depleted, and then they are homeless. And so many people I've talked to, I mean, like almost a dozen people, have been here because of Mayo Clinic and now are sleeping in the warming center. So those are a few of the barriers. I don't know if those can be touched on today, but I think we need to be more specific when we come to prevention in order to find solutions, because broad platitudes are wonderful. We definitely need to think positively, but we also need to think critically and address these and other barriers to cause this to not occur, homelessness not to occur in our community. Thank you.
Mr. Dunn.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, Councilmember Dennis, with everything that you've said. The purpose of today is really to start at that high level and work in areas of which we can get kind of that universal agreement. And then as we start there, we will be starting to have more strategy work going down and starting to touch on more of the detailed efforts of this. And frankly, probably some of the parts where, again, we maybe all of us don't agree on one path forward. And so what we want to do today is really to start with where are we all trying to go and kind of all understanding what that looks like. And then as we move forward together through this process and beyond, to know that there's going to be a lot of different strategies, different options, and probably different, at times, contentious conversations. But then to be able to step away and understand that each and every one of us is trying to do the same thing and we're all trying to reach that goal. So that's what we're trying to kind of do, is start with that. I don't know if foundation is the right word. I guess it'd be down here and then build up. But we are very aware of all of those types of barriers that you've talked about. And as we look at different programming and different needs, what we need to address those.
Okay, thank you. So we've asked some general questions. Now we want to ask you, here's our proposed purpose statement. You've already heard one comment from Dave Senjum that thinks it needs to be stronger. You need to be dedicated to ending homelessness. What would it take for you to support this vision? Nora.
I'm jumping ahead a few slides to where this has worked. What I would need to be able to support a huge vision like this is the knowledge that it really has worked. If there's data that would show us that if we apply ourselves in such a way that we can that we will dedicate ourselves to ending this thing, that we can really do it, and it's not a platitude, because I've seen so many vision statements that are platitudes.
Thank you. Connie? What would it take for you to support this vision? Michelle?
I agree with my colleagues' wordsmithing of this. I think that dedicating makes it a lot stronger and clearer. I guess for me to support this, certainly foundational to the city and county, we have a lot of tools at our disposal in this space, but without critical trusting partnerships with the community, with the nonprofit sector, we are not going to succeed at this. So, being very clear how we are going to engage all of those entities and bring them to the table and have the hard conversations we need to, but to understand all of the roles and responsibilities and how we're all moving forward together.
Thank you. City. Mayor. You no longer have a first name.
I gave that. Well, my name tag fell over. That's all. I mean, I personally speaking on this, it's been something I felt passionate about since I became mayor and something I've worked on since I've become mayor. I don't have any problem with strengthening the statement. I think that's perfectly fine. I guess for me, I need an assurance that it's not just the city and county that's working on this, that our partners too will embrace this same philosophy, that it's not just the two governments agreeing to it, that we can get more public support for the same thing and and continue to work together and get a commitment from folks that we're all working toward the same end and not against each other.
Thank you. Comment from the county? Observation?
Otherwise, I'll quickly just add on to that it's I think it was said by Mr. Dunn that this is not about government and nonprofits. This is about our partners across sectors committing together, including resources to figure out how we really take this on as a community. And that, of course, means our relationship and partnerships with our state government as well, and potentially our federal government. So I appreciate that that's an assumption of some of this conversation, but I just want to make it very explicit that is not just the safety net here that can solve this.
Mr. Dunn, would you define functional zero?
Yeah, I will just a little bit. And then what I'll probably do is if we're at a point, I can turn it over to Mary, who will go through it in more detail. But what we're really talking about with functional zero is getting to a point where we have a community system in place. And again, I think Council President Carlson, you said it very well. It's not just the people at this table, it is the community system in place that has the tools necessary to address the needs of individuals when they experience homelessness, so we can work with them immediately and strategically to build plans for them to help lift them out of homelessness as quickly as possible. So it's an acknowledgement that we're not saying that there will never be any people who would experience homelessness, but what we are saying is we want to have the tools that make it rare, brief, and non-recurring.
Does anyone see anything missing? What are we missing right now? I see Ryan moving forward.
The only thing I see missing is dealing with chemical dependency and or mental illness issues, which it does play a big factor in homelessness. So can we get state help? We can't fill up the ADC with people, that aren't violent, but just have issues. We need a program for that.
Good point. Anyone from the city? What are we missing?
You'll knock them dead.
Thank you. I too agree with beefing up the statement and just going back to that mission statement. I would simply get rid of a couple of the words and just simply start with Olmsted County dedicated, making it an active voice instead of a passive voice. We are dedicated. So that those are the only things I would add. But jumping off of what Dave said, yeah, it is the greater community. And also what you said, Brooke, it's the greater community. But I still hear organizations and NGOs and governmental agencies being the core of that. The connecting tissue of all of us is that we're human beings. Every single one of us, those with privilege, those without, those on the streets, those in encampments, those medical patients that we have in our community right now, business owners, property owners. So pulling from the humanity that we are, what policies can we put in place that can actually be worked through and enforced so that we don't continue to hit gaps? Are more people stepping up to do adult foster care? How do we educate to get more foster care people into this community that might take on some of those most vulnerable folks that are some of our safer population? How do we engage our health and medical practitioners to ensure that people who are having appointments aren't going to go back out onto the street? Could we suggest motel or hotel vouchers to folks to stay through that suggested amount of time when they are receiving care so we know that when they leave, their success rate is going to be much higher? Thinking about some of those out of the box things from the humanity that we are, I think could maybe drive those policies that may be more successful, hopefully.
I would just respond that in many of the conversations that I've been part of in the county, those are all elements that we're aware of, and that we can't do that alone. That it really does take the whole community, and it takes looking at I call it the drivers. What are the drivers to having someone lose their housing stability or being homeless? And then what are the solutions for that particular circumstance? And I think Mary's going to come up a little bit now and talk about Towards Zero, but notice on the first slide it said housing is a process, not a transaction. And the process is looking at where people are, what's led them to that place, what you can do to prevent it, and then what are the solutions. So part of prevention is changing the circumstances. Part of prevention is working with individuals. So I want to welcome Council Member Bransford, and we're through the first section of looking at this purpose statement and asking ourselves, is this a vision that we can support? And it's already been suggested that we need to strengthen the statement so that we are dedicated to ending homelessness by focusing on prevention, making it rare, brief, and non-occurring. And I know there's excellent notes being taken, and we'll see a different version of this. But do you, as joining us, is there any particular things that we can help catch you up on, and anything on your mind? And then we're going to move to talking about the second phase of our discussion is really looking at what do we mean by functional zero, which is how do we get to the place that we really are not having the kind of growth in homelessness that we've been having. And so that's part two of our discussion here.
Sure. I'm not going to make you recap the whole hour, and I apologize. I had a meeting.
Even I do need to microphone.
So I'm not going to. Is it even on? There we go.
You just have to get close.
Yep. I'm not going to make you recap a whole hour. I'll read the notes. But obviously the mission statement is clearly appropriate, and of course anyone here should back that. So.
All right. Well, we're glad to have you with us now. And I think we're ready to move on. Dave, you have a comment you wanted to make?
And just real brief, I'm just motivated to say this. And thank you for having us here today, Madam Chair, and on both sides, because I think we all know how important this is, and it faces every city in America, maybe the world. And as I look at this group here today, and as I look at your motivations to convening this, I always have believed that every cause needs a champion. And we're here today to decide whether or not we collectively, the city governments of Rochester and the county governments of Olmsted County are going to be the champions of this cause. And if we can agree that we're going to be the champions, then we can go forward in subsequent months and years and decide on all of these questions that come before us in terms of how to and what if and so on and so forth. But I just applaud you the fact that we're here today to frankly decide again whether or not we're going to be the champions, and I hope in the end that we are. We decide to do that because, as I said, every cause needs a champion, and it's a big one, and we had to take it on.
We'll go to Molly, and then we're going to move to hear the presentation on functional zero.
I'll try to make this really brief. Okay, I just wanted to echo a lot of things that were said about all of the things that are needed. But I think to show dedication to this, if we really are serious, I think elected officials and community leaders need to get into the trench, in metaphorically, to to listen and really understand the barriers, because it's one thing to have words, it's another thing to have action. And I mentioned this challenge from someone who experiences homelessness. He would like to see everyone spend a night in the warming center who makes these decisions. If that's possible, that'd be wonderful to see how well we can function the next day. But if we can't do like those kind of lived experiences, to at least spend time, go on trips, field trips, or help bring people in to give their stories. And then the other short thing, hopefully short, is with a projected $5 billion with a B dollars coming into our city, with lots more high income jobs, 6 digits. We really need to make sure that people who are caring for our children, caring for our elderly, people who are in those jobs of essential workers, that they don't fall into this category of homelessness because they can't keep up with property and taxes. Thank you.
Okay,
I think
thank you.
there's a pretty strong message overall from several of us that this idea of us sitting around the table, it really matters to come together and have this discussion, but it is not just us. So in order to really buy into that statement, it's a community commitment. So hoping as we move into talking about next steps, we're shifting in that direction towards how we will work across the community to share that vision together.
And part of sharing that vision is understanding this concept of functional zero, and is that one, not only can us as elected bodies endorse, but again, the people in the audience, Mark, are represent private sector, public sector. We have philanthropy in the audience. We have not for profits. We have uh, candidates for office. We have a whole variety, a really interesting cross sector in the audience. And we really, I think those of us who have been working on the housing issues for a few years know it's going to take us all. But we also have to have a lot of agreement on what we're trying to achieve. And now we're going to move into what are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to achieve functional zero? What does that mean? And then how do we get there? And as we move to getting there, it's going to take the entire village to get there, with government playing a role, and maybe sometimes a convening role. But our church communities, our not-for-profits, our volunteers, our business community, we all have something at stake for this. As Kelly Ray said, it's about our humanity as a community. So we're going to turn now to Mary O'Neill, Housing Director for Olmsted County, who's going to help us understand what is functional zero and how do we get there.
Thank you. All right, functional zero. First of all, I'm going to say that I am no expert in this topic. We are just learning about Built for Zero through research that we've done, one conversation we had with Hennepin County. So I would say our whole community is really at the very infancy stages.
Mary, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've learned if you step over one more step, the microphone picks you up better if you sit a little closer to Patrick Keene. At least that worked before.
Okay. I have one.
You have one on, but somehow before,
I'll put it.
Yeah, a little bit soft. Earlier, when she stepped closer to the table, the microphone picked her up.
Is that better?
That's better. Thank you very much. I want to make sure we can really hear you.
All right. Well, I'm going to repeat myself then. So everybody knows I am not the expert in this, but I do have the pleasure of trying to describe what Built for Zero is. I will say Built for Zero is a framework that was developed by an organization called Community Solutions. Built for Zero is a framework that really does align with the vision statement of the state of Minnesota. I believe yes, it's a national framework to end homelessness. Same vision as the state of Minnesota, and it's really about addressing homelessness at both the system level and the individual level. It's a system that has adequate housing and services. So as Dave explained about functional zero, it really is, we're always going to have people entering homelessness, but it's about knowing who those people are and addressing that homelessness episode immediately so that we have the resources available and to get them back into housing as quickly as possible. So that functional zero is really about keeping that homelessness brief and rare, and providing the support when somebody does get housed. So there's a short video that Dave's going to play here.
And now we go through. Okay.
See it everywhere. And for some of the American cities, homelessness is widespread. You see it everywhere. And for some, it seems almost inescapable. But did you ever wonder why? It's not just bad luck or individual circumstances. Millions of people go through hard times, lose their job, struggle with a health condition or housing instability without ever losing their homes. So why do some people manage to keep a roof over their head or get back on their feet right away, while others live unhoused, sometimes for years? And why are Black and Indigenous people disproportionately impacted by homelessness and 4 to 5 times more likely to experience it than people who are white? That's because it's not about people's choices or worth. Systems make the difference. The people who experience homelessness have fallen through gaping holes in the social safety net. They're failed by systems that were never designed to serve them. On top of that, systems also dictate what you have to go through to get support if you lose your home. Whether you encounter open doors, or get access to permanent housing, mental health support, legal aid, or whether you run into dead ends in a maze of agencies that don't talk to each other and don't remember you, shelters that only get you through the next day, and waitlists that never end. But here's the thing. We know that systems got us here, and we know they can also get us out. In places like Rockford, Illinois, veteran homelessness is rare and brief. That's because they built a strong homeless response system that knows the people it serves and works together to prevent them from losing their housing in the first place. Even large cities with complex systems like Detroit are drastically reducing homelessness. By breaking the system down into smaller parts, they can identify the bottlenecks and untangle them one by one, making sure people experiencing homelessness are quickly identified and connected to the resources they need. But Rockford and Detroit aren't the only places where this is happening. Across the country, communities are proving there is power in reimagining our homeless response systems. Homelessness can be solved. We can make it rare overall and brief when it occurs, everywhere. Learn more at homelessnessissolvable.org. In many American cities,
How do we go on to the next slide? Oh, there.
Okay, where has this worked? So these are the communities on the map across the country where they have embraced Built for Zero. There's 105 communities currently in the United States. 42 of those communities have measurably decreased homelessness in their community, and 14 can actually say they have met that functional zero. As you heard in the video, Rockford, Illinois is one of those. And it's close enough that we could possibly go visit. But it is working and there is data to show it. So what is Built for Zero? This is not an easy concept. It's hard to actually think about in reality and on the streets and actually doing the work. So I'm gonna try to best describe it as I can. So there's really 4 strategies involved with Built for Zero. One is identifying the shared community-wide vision or goal. Right now, if one was to ask me or anyone in the room who's responsible for solving homelessness, what would we say? We'd likely say the county, the city, we might say the landing, we might say Catholic Charities. And yes, we all have a piece or a role to play in solving homelessness. But we don't have an eye on how all of our agencies work together. So having this shared goal or this shared vision really aligns all of our efforts so we're moving in the same direction with the end user always in mind. And the end user is the person who is experiencing homelessness. That is the goal. And that's the end state that we're trying to get at. The second strategy is developing a single team that takes responsibility for the shared goal of ending homelessness. So one team, preferably multi-agency, so we're enlisting everybody in the community who takes responsibility. We work together, we meet frequently, we enhance our community outreach. Right now, our individual agencies and programs, we all have our own measures, we all have our own data. We might be measuring the number of people that we're serving in the Echo Center. The shelters are certainly measuring how many people are coming through their doors. But what does that really mean? We aren't collectively saying every person who comes through our doors, we want to get housed. We're not thinking about that end user necessarily as the person, as our customer. They are our customer. So Built for Zero communities really measure progress, not by individual agency goals and measures, but by how we're reducing homelessness as a whole in the community. The third strategy is creating real-time data. So everyone in this room probably has heard about this system called HMIS, and it has gotten a bad reputation over the years. But HMIS is what these communities are using to measure real-time information and to have that real-time information at their fingertips.
I am guessing that I'm not the only person around this table that has never heard of HMIS, and maybe you'd help us understand that.
Sorry.
Yes.
HMIS is a homeless management information system that we are required to use as homeless service providers. And there's no doubt it's a challenging system, but there are ways that we can really use that system to make it useful for that person experiencing homelessness. So it's gotten a bad rap over the years. It's been criticized as really being challenging and difficult, but we're trying to reframe that conversation.
And that is a state system?
It's required by HUD, and we have one software developer here in the state of Minnesota, yes. Do you have another question?
I'm past my one comment question. All right, thank you, Anna. I know the county uses it.
Yes.
We have HUD funded. Are other agencies within Rochester, Olmsted County using the HIMS?
Yes.
Okay, so it is
very common.
A common data collection tool for Three Rivers and
Correct.
Catholic Charities and Salvation Army. We're
Correct.
all using it now.
We're all using it now.
And so what you're telling us is that we can do more than reporting. We can really use it.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
So real-time data also involves knowing everyone who's entering the system, the homeless system. Right now, we were surprised when we did that count last summer of people who are currently unsheltered. We were surprised at that number of 174. The team who went out to do that count, there were a lot of people they didn't know. And there were a lot of people they knew, but didn't know where they were. So that's not conducive to actually getting people housed. So using this real-time data, it's about knowing who's entering the system of homelessness, who's actually experiencing homelessness at the time, and then who's exiting. And then supporting those people in housing so that they don't re-enter homeless. The fourth strategy is using that same data to identify who the target populations are of highest need and really use that to invest in resources and housing. So we will learn a lot from using that HMIS data as to who the target populations are that we need to focus on. And the Built for Zero framework, what I didn't say earlier is that Built for Zero is really intended to focus on one population. So it might be families, it might be youth, it might be veterans, it might be people who meet that chronic homeless eligibility, that's a HUD definition. But it's focusing on one population, and when you get that population down to functional zero, it's about scaling and moving the same strategies onto the next population. So it's not trying to solve the big issue of homelessness. It's taking it one piece at a time. And last but not least, we can't not talk about the role of shelter because that's really what brought us here, as Dave had described earlier. The steering committee really came together as a result of that shelter application not being granted. And the role of shelter will still be necessary because it's our safety net in our community. I think Brooke mentioned the safety net. That's what shelter is in our community. It's the last resort for people when they don't have family to stay with or friends to stay with. But as Dave said, it can also be that first step toward housing and getting people out of homelessness. So right now, we're not really functioning in that manner. We're not connected. We don't have that end goal of getting that person housed when they walk through the doors of the shelter. We're focused on getting them into shelter so they're out of the element. So we really do need a shelter. We have said from the beginning when we partnered with Catholic Charities on the use of the county building that is not a long-term building, long-term site for shelter. So it is something that we do need to address at some point. Not today, but it will be part of the conversation if we talk more about Built for Zero. And this is just an example of what we know about Built for Zero and what we think this might look like. So this is a gal who, very high profile person in the community who was experiencing homelessness. Many of us have seen her, have perhaps stopped and talked to her, offered her various support of some kind. She was sleeping outside for a long time, refused services, refused housing, even though she was offered many different types of housing. And one of the social workers on the housing stability team really spent some time getting to know her and learned that there were certain things about her past that she did not trust the government, or she didn't trust renting an apartment. There were various things that this social worker learned about her. She built enough trust with this gal that she allowed street medicine to come and treat her for some of the physical health issues that she had. And now she's actually living in one of our housing facilities and really doing quite well. So this is really that connection. So when we talk about real-time data, we're talking about by name case management, that we know everyone who's in that homeless response system. We're engaging with them on a personal level, getting to know them, getting to know what has happened in their past, that trauma that we've talked about earlier, what has happened in their past, and what has happened that has caused them to become homeless now. I would argue that the system is failing people. I don't agree that people are causing their own homelessness through whether it's mental illness or substance use or trauma. I just simply don't believe that. I believe it is a system that we do not have housing that is appropriate and necessary to support people with those kinds of challenges. And Taryn was going to talk about next steps.
Thank you. Just testing really quickly. So I'm here to close us out, be our closer, if you will. So now that you have a better understanding of what looks like, we wanted to summarize and sort of, well, where are we going with this high level plan? What are we going to do with this information? So essentially, we know we have resources as mentioned, and we know there's a lot of opportunity with our existing resources, right? So it's reevaluating what our resources are collectively, what are our opportunities? And specifically, we anticipate this will result in the need of identifying new investments needed, whether that's financially or people or resources. And there's a reason it says public and private, right? Collectively, we know we need more, and we know we have resources as it is. So that would be really our first step, or next step, if you will. So this is a proposed timeline for the bodies to look at currently. So the steering committee that was mentioned with all of the logos, if you will, met in February, and we asked the question, who's missing at this table? So we had that discussion so we could proceed with representation appropriately. And we're presenting to you folks. So really, we're seeking your support and buy-in today with the plan of coming back in August of what we learned, right? So after we get your support, we will proceed with actually doing the work and creating a Built for Zero plan that works for our community. So that would be that charrette example, if you will. And then we'll bring that plan back in August. And ideally, our vision is to implement this by year end and meet appropriate timelines for budget cycles as needed. So that's the proposed timeline for this group. And I'm just, in summary, showing this visual again, just to reinforce what has been said really, that we know these experiences aren't linear. We know there's not one cause that leads to someone's experience. There are many, and there are many services that need to occur to address each individual and household need. So we want to reinforce that this is complex, and that's why we need intention around creating a plan that addresses every individual or group's needs. And just as well as was mentioned, once someone is housed, maintaining that housing stability. So once you reach that level of housing stability, ensuring those services still are available and tapped at the right time. So with that, our part 2 request essentially is seeking support agreement to move forward with implementation as we've discussed with you, buy into the plan that we talked about, and this is our next step to come back with the plan. We do have some leading questions as well for the group to discuss. And that is all I've got for you now. Thank you.
Taryn, before you leave, would you go back to the slide that shows kind of the timeline? I think that will be a helpful point of reference for the next level of discussion. So the question now, but moving to discussion among those of us at the table, are start with what questions you have for this concept of Built for Zero. We'll answer the questions first, and then move to is this something that we can support? And I see that I believe you signaled, Kim, that you'd like to speak.
Thank you. And I do need to leave, so I appreciate you calling on me. I fully support this concept. I have talked with other cities and mayors and council members that are using it very successfully. So I was pleased to see this come forward. It was an idea that's been out there for a while. So I'm fully supportive of it. I will say my question is, as we move ahead, you stated earlier that we have work that we need to continue to do today as we move forward with this change and program. So how are you going to do those parallel when we know, for instance, the shelters, Salvation Army may stop serving soon? Is there someone that's going to ask them to continue so that we have a shelter in place until we get there? So I guess I'm just looking for, how are you going to do both? And I don't know.
You want to answer it?
And maybe you don't know yet. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, most definitely the work continues, right? The work continues. We have pieces in place that we can build upon. There's definitely resources that we need to really get to functional zero, but we continue to do the work every day. And yes, we might need a new shelter or more shelter beds right now. But it's about, again, that vision of that end user, that person experiencing homelessness and getting them housed. How does shelter lead to housing? So yes, those conversations are already happening. Yeah.
Laurel.
Mary, I have a question for you about Built for Zero. You mentioned that it works by ending homelessness one population at a time. And I know that there are many different ways to be homeless: homeless youth, homeless families, someone experiencing homelessness for the first time, someone experiencing homelessness persistently. So my question is how are those populations prioritized in a timeline? Who, for what population does homelessness end first?
That's a good question. I think that's going to be up to the steering committee as we have that facilitated conversation in May. What does that look like? And is it low-hanging fruit that we go after? Whatever that means. I'm sorry, that's a really bad analogy. But I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if it's those who are experiencing chronic homelessness that we, those are the folks that you see outside the most. I don't know. That's going to be up to that steering committee to decide.
So that it really is a community engaged plan. It's not that there's a plan that you're asking people to endorse.
Correct. This needs to be, decided.
Patrick.
Thank you. Yeah, this discussion has helped me quite a bit go from the high level vision towards what are the real, and I don't want to call it work plan, but what is behind that idea of zero. So that makes it more consistent for me or easier for me to have these discussions. Um, I guess I do feel like I'm asked to make a sort of a city commitment, and I'm going to ask my staff just to make sure if we feel, and this is City Administrator Zelms, are what we're being asked here consistent with our current city strategic priorities?
Thank you. Thank you, council member. I don't know if it's picking up. I can, such goods out there now, I can tell. Thank you for the question. I think the answer is yes. And if we go back to the beginning of the slides about the roles that the city plays, I think it's really within that framework to begin with. And then going through this process, understanding if there are other places where the city would be asked to also be more dedicated to this process or how we might be changing our systems. But we really tend to be in the prevention and or the housing space if you at a very high level. That doesn't mean that there aren't also significant interactions, especially from our first responders and our partners at parks and our partners at the library, et cetera, directly with people experiencing homelessness or with the partners that serve homeless population. But I would say when you think about your very high level priorities about affordable living, about quality living, and about even economic vibrancy and making sure that people are part of the economic landscape that it does align. It's just the details of how it aligns.
Good, thank you. Again, based on the discussions we've been having, I mean, I really like the systems thinking part of this. I do struggle with the idea that all the issues that people experience homelessness are system related. Again, I just have to spend more time thinking that way. But I think this is consistent with our city work, and we've got a lot of good partnerships. And I think this is something I'd be willing and very interested in joining into.
Opportunity for someone from the county?
Just moving out of the way.
All right. I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of simple. I think this is a noble goal, and I think if we were to look at a static population of people suffering homelessness, we could say yes, we could in a certain period of time provide them housing and fix their needs. But I just don't know how we stem the tide if we don't go back to the root causes that are bringing people into homelessness. So I support this, but I support it with very cautiously, and I wonder how we're going to afford it if we don't go back to address the root causes.
Does anyone on the staff want to respond?
Yeah, I certainly can. I don't think we're avoiding those or ignoring those. I think we are addressing root causes. There is a housing first model out there, best practice, which says in order for anyone to address their mental health issues or their substance use issues or their trauma, they have to have housing. Homelessness is about survival. It's about understanding where they're going to get their next meal or where they're going to sleep that night. So people in that situation where they're just surviving, they can't address some of those other issues. So housing first is really the best practice model that a lot of us use in the housing world. So certainly we are addressing those root causes, but I also know that there are larger issues around housing stock, affordability, all those kinds of things. And I would say we're addressing those as best we can as well.
Thank you. I'm going to make a statement and I'm going to try and make it as factually as possible, even though I've got some significant bias for what I'm going to say. In 1997, Money Magazine ranked us as the #1 city. At that time, they ranked Rockford, Illinois as number 300. I find it really, really ironic that Rockford, Illinois, was just presented to us as a city that's able to achieve this. And we are not, after being ranked number one numerous times since 1997 by Money Magazine. So I posit that, jumping off of what you said, Mary, also jumping off of what you just said, Mark, and what was in the video. Our system in Rochester, Minnesota, is not a system that is set up to meet the needs for our less privileged. Our system is set up, the economy we have here is set up to meet the needs of our most privileged. And I wonder if we have been striving for that privilege for so long that we are unable to help those that are most in need, and instead we have pushed them to the fringe with our policies. So, I have just such bad chicken scrawl here. I'm trying to decipher what I've written. So again, from what Mary said, it's a system that helps to create this. It's not one individual's experience that has brought them to into homelessness. So maybe we don't have the housing or the system in place to serve those that are most in need, but we instead have this system that supports an economy for privilege, or the most privileged in our community. So our economic landscape, to jump off of what City Administrator Zelm said, our economic landscape is not set up right now. So earlier I mentioned policy. I think that's going to be the key going ahead. And again, as we get towards the end of this, I'd really like to know how many of those least privileged folks, those with lived experience, those that are currently homeless now, are going to have a voice in what we're doing, because we are the elite in our community economically, or with privilege to vote, or with privilege to pass policies for others. I think their voice is going to be very, very important here as we move forward and we try to achieve this noble goal. Thanks.
That was my question as well. Just if you could talk more about how people with lived experience.
Oh, a double city question.
A double city question. I'm just sneaking in. Same question as Kelly raised.
Yeah, I would say we failed to really highlight that. People with lived experience are the experts, so we need them at the table. So we do plan.
One of the reasons I thought having the timeline up is because it's an opportunity to talk about the steering committee and who's on the steering committee. Would you fill us in on that, please?
Certainly. Olmsted County and Catholic Charities of Southern Minnesota, the Landing MN, Three Rivers Community Action, Zumbro Valley Health Center, Dorothy Day, Hospitality House.
And is the steering committee membership going to be open to others who would be interested in the broader community, including connections to those with lived experience? Is that part of the plan?
That is the plan, yes.
Did you say the school district?
The school district is not, as of right now.
20% of our students are suffering.
All right. So that's another thing to consider. I think I just took the county's turn, Dave, and we'll go to Molly, then to you. Molly?
Okay. I was literally going to say that this table is way too small, and that's what I'm glad that Kelly brought that up. Kelly brought that up. The school district, it should be a tri-government meeting here. It should have listening sessions, because it's really hard to have a table, that we need to make sure that we get into communities, co-design, whatever we need to do, because the steering committee needs to have access to so many more points of view and different thoughts. So I just also wanted to say I love the idea of the Helga example. Sorry,
Helga.
Sorry, I'm not sure if that's her real name. So I think that's wonderful, spending that time to get to know people and investing staff time to do that. And that's essentially so important in the world of the best hospital, the home of the best hospital in the world, to to address that we have these third world kind of situations where people are being stepped over, and this is unacceptable, and it should be an embarrassment to our city. So I think that having committee and staff time and getting more people, and like I said, as a school teacher myself, get the school district involved, because the parents and the kids who are, like, I know from, I've shared this as in here in Rochester, in one of the classes here in Rochester, a child came to the class I was working in and was from the car of his mother. And I just can't tell you how heart-wrenching that was every day to see this little boy, because you knew that something could be better in our city, and it's not. So I think we need to get more and more and more voices, if it's listening sessions, steering committees, but this situation needs to be happening far more frequently. Thank you.
Okay, I would take that as an endorsement for a broad steering committee with connection to broader community. And I can't, as an Olmsted County person, resist observing that we have 6 cities and 6 school districts in our county that would need to be engaged, as much as we appreciate the bold city of Rochester. So I think Dave was going to be next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to follow up on the, and I'm not sure if it's in the handbook or whatever, the so-called prescribed definition of either functional zero or built for zero, but I'm just looking up what's going on in Rockford. And the way Rockford at least defines it, it says reaching functional zero homelessness does not mean that no one in Rockford experiences homelessness, but it does mean that there are more people getting housed than there are people becoming homeless. And as I think about what I just read, that doesn't seem like a real powerful homelessness statement, because I'm not so sure that with our landing and our warming center, we may not be pretty close to that anyway. I don't know that, but the question then is this the definition of the Built for Zero program, or would the steering committee, et cetera, come back and define for us what Built for Zero is going to mean in Olmsted County, Rochester, Minnesota? That's the question.
Yeah, I would say the steering committee will need to define what it means for us here. We're a different community. So yes, that is the framework for Built for Zero. That is the measure of functional zero. But I don't know that the steering committee is going to come back and say that that's what we need for Rochester and Olmsted County.
And Madam Chair, just to follow up, I'm not so sure that, what we've done in St. Paul, and there's, we put a lot of homeless shelters in there, and I'm not sure that wouldn't be functional zero if you wanted to measure by the math that's been described in this program.
People are still experiencing homelessness.
They are, yes, no question about it.
Even though they're using shelter.
But are more being housed than are becoming homeless. I mean, that I don't know how you track that, but
Well, shelter isn't considered, it's temporary. What the measure is, are you in stable housing, not in shelter?
Yeah. So anyway, the way it sounds, that the steering committee will work on a functional zero definition. Thank you.
So the question before us now, in looking at this proposed timeline, knowing that we want to tailor it to our own community, knowing we want to have a broader steering committee than has been convened thus far, is, do you have concerns about that process? Whoops, it's gone, disappeared. We go back to the process. Yeah. Do you have concern about this timeline or the process? One of the things I noted is that, it's intended to be ready for the time that we work on our 2025 budget requests. I think there's implications in there, having that on the timeline, that there will be budget requests associated with this. What are your thoughts? Do you have comments, questions, concerns about the process? Dave has helped us look at the definition. Dave Senjum's helped us look at that definition. What else, members? Patrick?
Just for I see the steering committee. I know it exists right now. On our side, over on our notes for today, we had the outcomes and we talked about a task force. Is that the same as the steering committee, or is that something different?
It's the same. That's the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Other Other comments about process?
Madam Chair, just, and I've talked too much, but I'm assuming this is not a one and done gathering of these two bodies, that we're
We
going
are
to
already
track the
planning to gather
progress.
again in August. We have present the implementation strategies for Built to Zero to the city and county leadership in August. So we're planning an August gathering of this body. I don't think a date has been set yet, but that's the timeline that we're looking at. And so the idea would be the steering committee will come together May through July. They'll do their design work. They'll develop a local plan to implement Built for Zero. Then they'll come back to us in August and present that and take our feedback. And probably we'll see what process we use for community comment on the design as well. And from August, then we would move to, are we going to begin implementing any of this, and how would it affect our budgets? That's how I understand that timeline. And I'm getting the thumbs up from Mr. Dunn. So questions? Comments? Are we ready to move this along?
Anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak?
Oh, you're laughing? Yeah. Okay, because I want to try. Oh, Norm wants to speak. I have an idea that I want to try on you. It's kind of novel. You may not like. You may be. She may. It's going to embarrass the city council president, but we're going to do it anyway.
Are there stories that we can read where this has worked? Is that at the homelessnessissolvable.org?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments?
So Sheila's going to make us do something that on council we don't like to do, things like this, but we're going to do it, and she's going to talk us through how to.
Okay. So we need to get a sense of, are we really committed to this or not? Do we have reservations? And it's hard in an audience like this you're just hearing it for the first time. And my colleagues know that I go away and think about things, come back with even more questions from the last time. But we just want to sort of take the temperature of the room. And so I'd like to use a process that's called FIST to 5. FIST is, I am absolutely opposed to this. And I don't, there's just really, you probably can't move me. To 5 is, oh, I'm wildly enthusiastic about it, and let's go. And you raise any number of fingers from fist to 5, except
the middle
finger. Okay, so are we ready to move forward? Give me fist to 5. If you got some reservations, you put 3 fingers.
It's like rock, paper,
I was going to say something like that. We need to close our eyes and put our heads down, like heads up,
So
7 up.
I'll
7
count
up.
to 3, and let's do fist to 5. Ready? 1, 2, 3. We've got some 3s. We've got some 4s. We've got a 2. I think we got 3s. Oh, you can't do 10. Sorry. You got 3s. Okay, we have reservations, but we think we should go forward. Is what I'm taking away. Does anyone have? And we're proof will be what they come back with, for us to look more deeply at what the steering committee, how it's constituted, what the charrette exercise will be like, what our local plan is, and then we'll have a deep dive on the plan together again in August. Are we agreed to move forward? Michelle?
Quick question. Between now and August, will the representatives on the steering committee have a chance to bring feedback back to their individual organization that we would understand how the timeline is progressing, the progress the group is making prior to that gathering in August?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question, Commissioner. And yeah, I think we can continue to provide updates throughout the summer, where we're at in the process, the conversations that we're having. Hopefully, bring all of you along in this process as well. So as when we come back, because I know that there's nothing worse than coming back cold, like you are today, to try to make a very difficult decision or to have some kind of looking at something for the first time and then being asked to react to it. And so what we really want to do is bring the council and the board along with the community, because this really is trying to work with the community as a whole. It's our provider community who has taken time to be here today. It's our people in our community who are experiencing homelessness, working with them to identify what works with them and how we work together. And so bringing the community along the way is going to be a key part of this.
Mark,
This may have been
just get real close.
this may have been brought up earlier in the meeting, but when we were talking about populations, I had a conversation with a fellow council member on this, and it's really important, is that those with disabilities, either cognitive, particularly that are in group homes, have an aging parent, and there's sometimes space is limited and they can't get into these facilities, or parents get too old to take care of children or grandchildren with disabilities, that they too can wind up on the street. And I don't know what we know about that, but it's a different permutation on the overall problem that really needs to not slip through the cracks. And so I don't know if it was brought up earlier. I would strongly hope that the steering committee and or task force also look at that demographic and those families to make sure that they also, have support before that happens, because it can happen.
You have just modeled what we need for the next question is what's missing. You just modeled that we have some things missing from this proposal right now. What else do you see as missing? What are we missing?
Especially among those who've had some more reservations throughout this conversation.
Yeah. What would I guess we earlier we asked what it would take for you to support the vision. Maybe there's a variation of that. What would it take for you to support this process? Well, let's maybe start with any of you who have some reservations, because you were like 10, so I'm going to hold off on you.
A long time ago. Yeah.
Sean.
Well, I think you have to remember that we took a tough vote on Monday on the camping ordinance, and the rude emails from providers. I don't know how you're going to get 10 providers to do the same thing, and how they badmouth the county, and how they badmouth the city, and how some people think handing out tents is wonderful, and some people think that it's okay for 3 people to die in a tent last summer. So, when you go visit these encampments and the unsanitary conditions and the items that are happening there are just heartbreaking. So, I go off what Mr. Senjum said, and I kind of summed it up as no sum game. I mean, that we're really not eliminating it. We're just not going to have more homelessness. And I'm not particularly sure that's what people want. And, I go off what Mr. Mueller said was, where's the mental health part of this? Where is the prevention? And I'm more for prevention. I know the city council voted with their CDBG money to give more money to Salvation Army to prevent homelessness. So I don't know how you get a gang of 10 together to come up with a solution. I hope give you nothing but the best of luck.
Laurel.
I think it would be helpful for all of us to see data on successful precedent for cities that have successfully or are successfully addressing homelessness. This morning, County Attorney Ostrom mentioned in a video call a presentation about Charlotte, North Carolina, and their successes in addressing homelessness. In researching and being ready for today, I learned about Houston, Texas, which since 2011 has reduced homelessness by 63% by having a housing first approach. So the model matters, and this is not an intractable problem. Some cities have solved it or are solving it or are headed in the right direction. So I think we can look to successful precedent for inspiration and reassurance.
Do you want to speak?
I totally echo that. I think there's been a lot of things sent to us. I know I've received from people in Ward 6 and across the city ideas from other cities as well. So I think that's important. And I think I've mentioned this a little bit, but we need to take this table into the places that where people are struggling. I think we could do these kind of committees in the park where people have, and have their, hopefully, not being criminalized for encampments, but where they've had struggles, to encourage people, because it's hard to get. I've handed out to people, say, come to city council, come speak to the county, and it's very intimidating to come, in front of a group where we're all high up on a dais and looking down at you, and I feel we need to go where people are and take the table to them, and just look at the measure of a compassionate society is. And that's our goal. That's our platform. That's our priorities, is to be a welcoming and compassionate city. And to measure compassion is to see how we treat our most vulnerable of our population. And so I think if we truly believe the principles and things that we have written down everywhere, this is a priority. And I put up 10 because it should have been done long ago. Things should have been tried long ago. And so I think it's far overdue. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, we are just about at our time, and I'm wondering if Mr. Dunn or Ms. Edens has any closing comments they wanted to make before I offer the same to my companion here.
Well, I think number one, I just want to say thank all of you in attendance today. I want to thank all of our partners for our continued work that we're doing together. And then thank all of you for attending this meeting. Obviously, this is a challenging issue. It's one that no one entity can address alone, which is why we really wanted to start the process of bringing everybody together. I think we're very excited about this path forward. I feel like we have some great momentum in our community, and I really believe that as we come together over the summer and have some of these conversations, and some of them are going to be tough conversations. They really are. And I have, and Councilmember Palmer, to your kind of point with the challenging stuff that you all had to deal with just this week, that's hard. And I know that's as we've talked as providers and service groups, that's hard. And that's where we want to start with, where do we all agree? Where can we work together? Where are those spaces where we can have that collective impact and really have make the community work? So thank you. This, like we said, this is the start. I don't know, Mary, if there's anything that I missed. Okay, thank you.
So
Taryn.
I just like to make a quick observation, which is we gathered many of the people in this room gathered here in I think this very room in about 2018, 2019, before we had a warming shelter, before we had social workers assigned to the schools, before we had the Echo Center doing outreach, before we had the kind of encampments that we're having in our parks now, before we had the kind of dialogue that we're having now about what are the factors that lead to homelessness, what's happening in our systems so that we can maintain family stability and personal stability. So this, functional zero is probably not zero. And I think Rockford functional zero was only around veterans, which is a smaller number of individuals, which is a group they've been working on in Minnesota as well. So homelessness or lack of housing stability has many factors, and there's many actors, from our social work staff working with troubled adolescents, to this what's happening in the schools, to the substance abuse and mental health issues that Brian is pointing out. Some of you know that I've been on the stump talking about the lack of treatment beds we have in our state of Minnesota for adolescents and for adults with substance abuse or mental health problems. You've heard Greg Wright talk about the fact that we don't look to what's happening to our elders. So it is a population-based issue. We haven't solved it. We've come a long way. We haven't had this kind of around the table dialogue in the past. We haven't had this many different pastors and private sector and not-for-profit organizations in our community stepping up and saying, I'll be there. I happened to be involved, probably in 1987, when the community had a big unrest about the Dorothy Day House. And a group of volunteers came together and created that program, which still serves families 40 years later. And so we have a history of being able to collaborate across sectors in our community. We have a history of not always agreeing and not always seeing an easy path forward. But I think today marks a day where we are going to make some real progress. Just like 4, 5, 6 years ago when the mayor called a meeting and we had a big town hall meeting. And at that point, we didn't have a family shelter. We didn't have a youth shelter. We didn't think about medical respite. People in the audience called that out. And we've been making progress. Not as fast as maybe we'd all desire, but we've been making progress. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming together, including all the people in the audience that I see back there that I can't really see, but because we really do have to do this together. And having this meeting with our city council and our county board, making a commitment to support the Homeless Response Steering Committee and making a commitment to come together again in August to look at what is the plan that our community has come up with, and can we support that? I just really want to thank everybody and for the nice way we shared the microphones today. That was really well done. So, and I believe our council president has a comment she might like to make as well.
That was just what I was going to say. Thank you, everyone, for your earnest and open participation, and look forward to working together with all of you and all our partners in the future. So thank you.
Thanks
staff,
everyone.
too.
We are adjourned and available for individual small conversations, I'm sure.